40 years ago, in rural China, thousands of young families were faced with an emotionally difficult dilemma: to keep a baby and harbor a life against the will of the government, or comply with the newly implemented rules and give up or get rid of the newborn to avoid the penalties, fines, and stress of raising a second child. Most of them were forced to choose the latter, either by familial pressure or government intervention. Such was the result of China's one-child policy. Although it seems barbaric and unethical today, it cannot be ignored that China took a stand to manage its rising population crisis in an attempt to protect its future economic prosperity. Even though it sparked decades of international debate and scrutiny, China's stand in implementing the one-child policy was the final product of a careful plan to preserve the Chinese people's collective well-being by keeping its booming population in check. The question remains, why and at what cost was this stand taken? Because of World War II and the Chinese Civil War, China suffered a severe population loss from the constant violence and turmoil. Chairman Mao Zedong seized power, forming the People's Republic of China. Mao strongly encouraged the Chinese people to produce offspring, saying that the more people there are, the stronger we are. He and his administration publicly banned contraceptives. But this control of the population was not widely accepted. In the words of the Chinese author Ma Jian,
since the Communist Party came to power in 1949, it has viewed the country's population as a faceless number that it can increase or decrease as it chooses, not a society of individuals with unique desires and inviolable rights.
But coming from that culture, it's a women's rights issue as well. And I say that because I believe that in many instances the birth mothers, a lot of them were left with no choice, and they were powerless to overcome that.
The death of Mao Zedong in 1976 led a new approach under the rule of Deng Xiaoping. Xiaoping countered the actions taken by his predecessor. From 1960 to 1978, the population had reached 962 million. The government feared that a great disaster was soon to come. An estimate of 1.4 billion people in China by the end of the 20th century would lead to food shortages, rebellions, disruption of central government, and an economic catastrophe. Renowned author Mei Feng stated,
China's one-child policy was crafted by military scientists who believed any regrettable side effects could be swiftly mitigated and women's fertility rates easily adjusted.
The one-child policy was the government's attempt to take a stand to stabilize the population and economy in order to achieve prosperity. This policy was a law prohibiting a family from bearing more than one child. It was a measure to encourage late marriage and postpone childbearing, to have fewer but healthier babies, which ultimately would avoid overpopulation. The law was enacted and formally took effect on September 25, 1980. According to Dr. Wang Feng of the University of California, Irvine, an expert on the policy,
nowhere in the world did politics and policies figure more prominently in the effort to control population growth than in China. The policy of allowing all couples to have only one child finds no equal in the world.
Government agencies monitored families and controlled when they were allowed to conceive. Women would give birth, and then state officials would appear after a month to force an IUD surgery. Wang Jinyao, Dean of the China Philanthropy Research Institute, remarks that,
and later there were cases where farmers' houses were torn down, the draft animals were taken away, the property was taken away, and the individuals were detained.
The consequences of the law proved drastic. The one-child policy's dramatic effect, an estimated 400 to 500 million births were prevented through 2015. In Chinese rural villages, when women gave birth to a second child, there was the looming threat of monetary punishments, physical harm, jail time, or worse. Some aborted the unwanted fetuses immediately. Newborns were killed by drowning, suffocation, strangulation, or smothering. As a result of the families wanting a male heir to carry on the family name, many of the female babies were abandoned or killed. Infanticide, the killing of a baby within a year of birth, was common. Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen estimated that
infanticide and gendercide have contributed to a missing 100 million women in Asia. Roughly half of those were Chinese.
In the late 1980s, selective abortions became possible with new technology like the widespread ultrasounds. John Huntsman Jr., the former United States ambassador to China, wrote,
Abnormally high sex ratio at birth and excess female child mortality both contribute directly to the sex ratio imbalance in China.
As a result of the government's enforcement of the one-child policy, China now reports around 600,000 orphans. Others argue 1 million or more. Countless orphanages have come into existence in China, mostly having a largely disproportionate number of abandoned girls. When the Atlantic reporter Anne F. Thurston visited China in 1996, she was horrified. She found babies to be completely quiet and withdrawn, appearing institutionalized, with no hope of being rescued. But now, as recent as 2014, baby hatches have been found attached to orphanages, providing a place with cribs, incubators, and air conditioning systems where parents leave babies to safely give them up in private. Even with all of its drawbacks, the stand China took had some positive aspects. Although Western countries view it as barbaric, the law stabilized China's population growth to its 1.35 billion people today. A dangerous population explosion was prevented. Also, the fertility rate of women dropped, the poverty rate declined, and the economy grew. Currently, the majority of the population experiences better nutrition, improved education, longer life expectancy, and higher living standards. Unfortunately, not many thought of the consequences that would result from a gender imbalance in the population. As stated by John Huntsman Jr.,
social consequences of the imbalance include an estimated excess of over 30 million unmarriageable males, a potentially destabilizing force that threatens to cause unrest in the most economically marginalized areas.
Today's dwindling workforce resulted from the gradually aging population. The disproportionate senior demographics bring up alarming consequences. Because of the law, people produced less children that would later grow up and work, contributing to a shrinking labor force. Even with the law, the nation's population still exceeded 1 billion. China's 2000 census reported a total population of 1.26 billion people. Today, the current population of 1.35 billion leads the debate on whether or not China can sustain such a population level. In recent years, the one-child policy has been relaxed. In 2015, China amended the policy allowing citizens to now bear 2 children. In 2016, the government released a statement offering the free removal of all forced IUD devices. Controversy ensued, with women arguing that the government was merely controlling their bodies. Xu Xinren, author and journalist, but also Chinese mother of 1, says,
I'm happy for those many couples who now have the chance to have more children. I'm sad for those who has come too late to, who never had the chance to have more.
This change marks a new era in Chinese history. But the stand that China took, with its one-child policy, reshaped the nation and its culture for years to come.